Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to be here with all of you on this beautiful Friday. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Lauren. I am the Senior Manager of Marketing and Community for 𝘲𝘲𝘀𝘲. If you've never been on one of these calls before, I am so thrilled to have you here. Welcome. This is going to be an awesome hour, engaging and learning and, really virtually networking with one another and, hearing from each other's experiences and, of course, our speakers' experiences, who I'm going to introduce in just a few moments. But before we do get started and dive into all of the wonderful things that are customer success, I want to go through a couple quick housekeeping items. So to start, this is really meant to be an engaging conversation. So if you have the opportunity right now to turn on your cameras, you'll see that you have the ability to not only unmute yourself, but to write in the chat, to, again, really participate in this conversation. The entirety of what we're going to be talking about comes from the questions that you actually submitted to join this conversation. So I really want to hear from you. Feel free to ask follow-up questions, to ask additional questions in the chat, to elaborate on your experiences. Perhaps you have a really great answer to one of the questions. Don't hesitate to share this information, whether it's in the chat or there's a really cool raise your hand feature. If myself or Iri is talking, feel free to use that, and I'll make sure to monitor and get you on the unmute, on the mic, for lack of a better phrase, virtually. But secondly, we are also recording today. So if you can't make the chat, so if you're tuning in to the recording, or if you're a couple minutes late, don't worry. I also want to, discourage people right now from taking notes or, multitasking. I want you to be active in this conversation and listening and participating. So you can always rewatch the chat later and take notes and share with your organization. So really get in there and participate. I'm excited to kind of virtually meet all of you. It's going to be a really great chat. So without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Iri to the Chat and Learn stage. So I would love for you just to give us a little bit of background about you, what you do, and why you're going to be chatting with us today.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me this morning. My name is 𝘧𝘪𝘳𝘠𝘧𝘠𝑗𝑡𝑠. I'm the Chief Customer Officer and CEO for CSM Practice. I've started the company about 5 years ago. We specialize in working with customer success teams from different organizations, different sizes and industries, to help them establish the customer success practice within their own organization, or help them scale it up as their company grows and they're ready to reinvest in those initiatives. Why should you be listening to me? Well, I think we bring in a unique experience to the fold with everything related to this new movement of customer success. We've worked with dozens of customers and of different sizes, from startups to large enterprise companies. We've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't. I've seen many cases where we would, there's an attempt to do a strategy without having it being customer-centric, and see what happens when that unfolds. And I've seen very successful initiatives that take place where customer was top of mind and the impact that that could bring. So hopefully in this conversation, I want to share my experiences with you and see if there's anything you would want to learn from this conversation and bring back to your own organization to really make a change and an impact, not only on your organization, but also as you promote yourself within the organization, and see what can happen from there.
Amazing. And, we were talking about so many great things before we actually hit the record button. So we're gonna dive into that in just a second. But if you've been on these calls before, you know that I like to pop the questions up on the screen beforehand, just so you can get an idea of the scope of the conversation today. So you guys asked a ton of questions, and I know Iri has seen all of them, and she can attest that there were a lot. and a lot of repeats. So some of these we did condense into, one or two questions. But like I said, if there's specific examples or, scenarios that you want to bring up or have a specific question about, feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. But these are the big questions that you guys asked, and I'm really excited to kind of dive into them in a little more meat, because these are really good. But even before I think, we get to this first question, I want to talk about what you had said initially. Why is this important? Why should we be talking about customer success? And what is this movement that we're seeing now in all of these companies? We get so many, little questions about how to, make your manager more invested or your organization, and how do I promote myself? But let's talk high level to kick us off.
Yeah, as I was looking through the questions, there was none that asked me, why should we do a customer-centric approach to things in our organization? And I think that's important if you were to enroll your executive team in this type of culture. And so what we've seen, Lauren, is that customers that think through what the customer needs at the forefront of new initiatives see better results than those who decide on new initiatives without sort of getting their customer feedback around that. And I'll give you an example. Just this last Pulse conference, and Pulse conference is one of the largest customer success conferences in the world. It just happened in May. I did a presentation with 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘦𝘠𝘕. She's the Chief Customer Officer for Glint, amazing person. And so what she shared is that when she followed the framework, she actually developed a methodology for her SMB clients that's a scalable customer success initiative that typically, when you do a customer success at scale, you're essentially giving the customers less touch, less face time with you. And so the nomenclature is that if you have less than a white glove, usually customers are less satisfied. There's going to be a higher churn rate. But with following this framework, she was actually able to increase the NPS score by 40 points. So a huge successful initiative on her front. And I think that there's something to be said about doing things from a customer-centric standpoint. And so in this conversation, what I want to share is that framework that she has followed. And it's a framework that CSM Practice put together in place to share with the community. So I'm going to expose that today. If you wanted to hear specifically about the example with 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘦𝘠𝘕, you're welcome to just go on Google and type in Helping Sales Radio, 𝘧𝘧𝘧𝘧 Pulse, where I recap the presentation on an episode that I did for a podcast, and you can get a little bit more detail around that. And we also did a YouTube video with Mary on the topic, and I think you can find that on YouTube/CSM Practice, and then look for the YouTube video with 𝘦𝘹𝘹𝘦𝘦𝘠𝘕.
We love Mary. She did a chat with us just a few weeks ago. So she's
awesome.
She's amazing. And I can definitely find that link and put that in the follow-up email as well, so we can review that. But that's amazing. And again, I'm so excited to kind of be here and chatting about all this, because like we said before we kind of got started, this field is just booming right now. There are so many roles, there's so much opportunity, and just an opportunity for organizations to really scale and grow and learn from their customers. So this is so great. So let's kick us off with the first actual question here. So is there a particularly helpful roadmap to becoming a customer-centric organization?
Yes, actually there is. When we think about what customer-centric really means, we kind of want to start talking about thinking through the different things that this might mean in general. So when we have, for example, a customer, so before I dive into this, so in general, some of you are already in customer success. I don't know how many, but I can see, for example, 𝘧𝘧𝘧𝘧𝘧, I know for sure. I've seen this name before. I know he's in customer success. So I'm assuming some of you are. So if you're in customer success and you have a health score, if your health score is designed to say whether or not the customer is going to renew, then it's a very internal health score that's designed to serve whomever is responsible for renewal to do their job better. It's an internal metric that helps your own organization. It's not a metric that helps your customers. A health score that's designed to help your customer would tell them, are they closer to become an industry leader in what your company has the authority on? Is your customer gets the most value out of you as a vendor? That's a customer-centric focused scorecard. So a lot of times we don't even think about little things like health score in a customer-centric way. Certainly when we have other teams, like the product team, they might have the roadmap. Like typically, if you think about product teams 20 years ago, most of their roadmap was dictated by sales. The sales team would say, hey, we need to win more deals. Therefore, product team, we need to create these and these features so that we can be more competitive in the market. And some of this culture is still inherited and, embedded in product managers' mindset that they need to be first and foremost competitive in the market. And any kind of enhancement requests that are submitted by customers may or may not be part of the decision makers for enhancing the roadmap. Certainly, a truly customer-focused or customer-centric product team would even close the loop on customer enhancements requests. So if we get enhancement requests from users and we never close the loop, meaning letting them know whether or not we actually address their enhancement request, then we're not really customer focused, because we're not really catering to the ultimate customer experience, which is I made a request and then you tell me whether or not you're going to do it. And if you did it, is it done? And so, it's just basic stuff like that, And so the question is like, how do you become a customer centric? How do you shift the organization and your processes to be customer focused, or putting the customer in the front of almost every decision or every process that you have within the company? So if you're an executive or a team manager within your company, this is going to be much easier to discuss, because then you really control the motions in developing an initiative. And the first step that I see a lot of times being skipped is really taking the time to understand your existing customers. So a lot of times that step is, and by the way, I just have a client that asked me to do the same thing. They wanted me to come in and, optimize their success plan processes. And I said, well, can we talk to some of your customers to see if your customers are getting any value from this process? And then the answer was, well, you can talk to some of our internal team members and they can tell you what the customer feedback was. Come on, like we actually need to interview customers to really understand how they feel about our processes. How do we compare against other vendors in certain aspects? And then take that feedback, whether it's from surveys or interviews, define the goals for our initiatives based on what our customers want to accomplish, and then design those processes and new templates based on that feedback. Now, there's another thing that we should do if you were to really be successful, and this is where the gist of it is once you decide on a playbook, and let's say you designed it based on what customers said, you want to run it on a cohort of clients. Don't launch it like real big, unless you have like 20 customers, fine. But if you have hundreds of customers, you don't want to launch these new massive initiatives that impact customer experience to the whole customers at the same time. You want to do it for a specific pilot of customers, because then you can get their quotes, you can get their feedback to then loop back to the other teams, to CSMs that don't really want to make the change, to other customers that might resist the change, in order to create these enrollment conversations. I'll stop here because I feel like I talked a lot.
Well, I have a question about that, actually, a follow-up. So, I've been in organizations where, we have a dedicated, like research team who works with a customer, or voice of a customer program, or, basically like a team dedicated to doing that user research. However, even at 𝘭𝑪h𝑡𝑜 now, like we're a really small team. We're very lean.
Mhm.
You know, who owns that research piece? Is that something that like the CS team picks up if there's no dedicated person for that, or who kind of spearheads that user research to make sure that these decisions are super informed?
That's a good question. I think with the very small startups, you can definitely have the customer success team own that. What I would really be careful about is that if you're going to ask customers about things related to your team, they might not be completely truthful in their responses because they wouldn't want to hurt your feelings. So sometimes it's good to have a different team own this process because then there's less bias. In very large organizations, this research motion would typically be owned by marketing. Marketing would typically own the voice of the customer. And, you know, there's something to be said about that. You know, like having a third party or like a third team own this thing. But I feel like, you know, the customer success team would lose some of the power or some of the control over what questions to ask. So I've seen it done either by marketing or by customer success, sometimes with a professional services team. I think it depends on the company. When you do have it under the customer success team, you have a little bit more control over the questions you want to ask. And so if marketing drives it, it'll be more about the customer experience with the product. The NPS survey would be about the product. When customer success drives the surveys, it would be about the partnership. And so we no longer look at what is the feedback around the product experience. We look at the feedback around the whole experience and the value that the customer gets beyond the usage of the product, meaning, did my CSM become my trusted advisor? Did I get to change and optimize my own organization based on this relationship?
No, that makes total sense. And obviously in small startups, everyone's kind of doing a little bit of everything. So it seems just like a really nice opportunity to kind of collaborate and figure out where, you know, everyone can kind of work together to meet these goals.
Yeah.
That's
I'll give you an
fascinating.
example. I had one, maybe there's a better question to share this example, but I had one customer where the CCO actually made sure that she sent out a survey that the purpose of that survey was to define whether customers was it easy for them to work with her organization, not just the CSMs, but throughout the customer journey. So how easy was the customer journey for the customer? So she asked them about the support experience and every aspect of customer facing transactions that happen, from billing to everything else. And I think there's something to be said about embracing a customer-centric approach when you do, I think it's called like a CES survey, to really understand how everybody plays a part in impacting the customer experience.
Absolutely. That's so true. Yeah, taking a step back and really evaluating how everyone as a whole fits in. That's so important. Is there anything else on this slide that we want to talk about, or do we want to move to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody in the audience has a question about it. I didn't really go through the entire motions, but I kind of wanted to hit on the points of this doesn't mean your perception of customers, but actually listening actively to what customers are saying about the initiative you're thinking about doing, or uncovering trends for things that customers want you to focus on. And so you can only figure this out if you did a survey or follow-up interviews, and ideally by a third party. So if you're going to do a win-loss analysis, don't ask the salesperson to follow up with the customer, because they're never going to tell you that, oh, the customer said that they were oversold. Like, it's kind of silly. So you kind of want to have somebody else do it. And then doing a pilot to get the quotes, and I think the rest is just, best practices around doing an initiative in general and providing for change management and scalability. So
yeah, I love this diagram. This is so nice. So thank you for popping that in there.
Sure.
Our next question, and like Irit said, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm watching it, so I will bring them up as I can pepper them in. But don't hesitate to participate. Our next question is, what are the best practices to bring down the walls of the company functional silos and promote more collaborative environments between departments with different and competing objectives? So actually a little bit of what we were kind of just talking about.
Yeah, this happens more often than I would care to see. So I decided to share this slide with you guys. There's several things, I think, that in aspects of what can you do in order to sort of start breaking down the silos. And I think communication is really key. The one thing that I've noticed is that, the CSM really plays a central role within the organization. And we can be proactive around providing feedback to different team members to help them do their job better. So for example, for the sales team, we hold a lot of really important information about the customer to help them understand if there's expansion opportunities, cross-sell opportunities. I don't know if sometimes sales even owns renewals. So anything that can help them close more deals. And for new deals, that might be customers that are similar to the ones that they have in their pipeline that could serve as references. For marketing, we can definitely help with effective customer campaigns or identifying advocates. With support, we can help, if there's a lot of escalations and outages, we can help on the relationship front while support is dealing with actually resolving those issues. If we have a renewal team, we can flag renewal risks early. Or if we have a product team, that's the one, where we really need to tighten in the relationship the most. I feel like this is an area that's not well addressed yet, but I think there's a ton of opportunity there to shore up not just the enhancement requests, but really give them insights on priorities for roadmap and get a seat at the table in influencing the roadmap, as well as working and prioritizing any kind of initiatives for the product team to help with the onboarding experience. We know for a fact, I think TSIA is a membership organization that provides a ton of important benchmark data for customer success teams to understand how they benchmark against industry. And they did this research showing that customers that did not have a successful onboarding experience have a lot more probability, a higher probability of churning in year one than those who doesn't. I think it's obviously, duh. I think it's at the tune of like 30%. So there's a lot of things that we can do and encourage the product team by sharing these kind of statistics within our own organization. So not just say, hey, this is the industry benchmark, but how do we do against that benchmark? And can the product team help with that? And so you can see there's a ton of things that we can do first and foremost to just break down the communication and provide helpful information to the other team. The other thing that, so do you have any questions about that?
Not yet. They're coming.
The other team, so this is just us providing important information to the other teams and just making sure that we collaborate with them on different areas that obviously impact the customer experience and the customer success. The other thing that I think would really help break the silos is start promoting ourselves as CSMs more fiercely within the organization. One exercise that I've done with one of my clients that had this really big issue on selling the customer success value within the organization was to truly sit down with each one of those teams and understand what are the most important KPIs for them. So how do each one of these specific groups monitors and assesses their own success, and then say, how can I impact their KPIs? And when she started talking about her own team during executive meetings, she started talking it in the areas that she knows each one of these team members would appreciate and can relate to. I think sometimes we're just not very, very good at selling our our own value internally as CSMs. So I think these are good 2 steps in breaking down the silos.
It seems like a big takeaway that I'm getting from this is really just communication, you know, communicating your needs, communicating your skills, communicating, you know, your wants versus needs. It seems like if we can just, you know, like you said, break down the silos, break down the walls, and just talk about these things and make yourself accessible, then we can be more successful in all of these roles.
Yeah, I mean, I would have also thrown in, hey, do a RACI chart. And for those who don't know what a RACI chart is basically you take all the processes you all supposed to be coordinating around and see if you can improve the definitions around who should be involved, when, how, what system potentially are you going to use so that you can improve the process. I have seen in many cases, you know, people are doing a RACI chart and still nothing happens. And so that's why I emphasize these kind of things. If we can understand how we can impact their work and we can change ourselves in how much of a partnership mindset we're bringing into the organization, then by default, a lot of times when we change our behavior, the other team will change their own as well.
Totally agree. And there's a great question in the chat. Well, I understand there are many activities done by the CSM. How can we scale the org, mainly for the SMB segment, where each CSM will handle more than 150 accounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a number of ways that you can scale. Typically, when I see CSM ratio for you know, it's at that point, it depends if you also own the renewal or not. So if the CSM owns the renewal, basically at 150 and above, you're mainly just doing the renewal transactions and providing a just-in-time type of engagement model where you only serve the customer when they really need to. And usually your scorecard would look like a risk index. You can improve that. So I actually highly encourage you to either download the slides from the 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘦𝘱𝘕 you know, the collaborative presentation we've done at Pulse, or listen to that podcast I mentioned, because we do go through what was done. But essentially, Mary had developed a CSM pool model that was very successful because it was supported by other one-to-many programs. So I think it's okay to have like a very lower touch to some of the customer base, but know that the CSM would have less time to be focused on value-driven playbooks. And so you can augment that by having a specialized role supporting that team in providing health checks as a premium service, providing community events, online live or recorded, local events, collateral around how to be successful with you and how to realize value quickly, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that's going to be key to scaling a customer success operation, especially if you have 1 to 150. So it's not a pure tech touch. I would say hybrid touch is probably better because you can't really automate empathy. But the key to do that is to have some supportive roles to the CSM, because I think it's one thing to say, hey, CSM, you're responsible for the customer health and you're you're actively reaching out, and then you also need to figure out how to do it. That's just like one-to-many things that they need to do. But if you have a separate team that can figure out how to do it, then you're in a much better position to be successful.
Great answer. And if only our technology and bots could become empathetic, that would be amazing.
Right? Amazing. Yeah.
And I think we're going to cover this question later. So the second one, what metrics should CS own? Renewals, expansion, advocacy, retention? If so, what is the weightage? I don't know if you want to talk about that now or you want to talk about that in a bit.
I don't know that I'm going to talk about it later. So this is a good one. The real answer, Lauren, this guy's going to hate me. It depends. It depends. So I'm assuming, again, this is 1 to 150 accounts. You own the renewals. And so if you own the renewals and you have so many accounts, you might as well own the renewal numbers, obviously. As your company grows and maybe there's a renewal team to support you, so if there is account managers, so that's what I said. If your organization is fairly large, you have account managers or renewal managers that actually own the expansion and the renewals. And all the CSM does is prevention, mitigate any kind of issues that the customer has based on data-driven, then I don't know that you need to necessarily be driven entirely by the retention numbers. I would say look at the different metrics as well. So I wouldn't say NPS, but I would say, like, let's take a look at the goals of your team. Is it really to drive retention and like renewals? Obviously, expansions are being done by another team. So when you strip the financial transactions away from CSMs, I think we should look at what does your team should be doing. And some teams are actually being compensated based on adoption metrics or consumption metrics rather than the financial metrics. And maybe they have a team bonus on the renewal, but we want to make sure that the metrics that we provide the CSMs are actually gearing them to be proactive around the things that we want them to do. So metrics and KPIs for team performance or CSM individual performance typically would foster a specific behavior. So we need to be very careful at that level as to what do we assign the CSMs. So it could be the number of MSQLs if we wanted to encourage them to find opportunities for upsells, but not actually own the financial transactions. We can also give them, a metric to call out how many moments of value did they actually wrote down and identified, and that means can we capture exactly what value did we bring to the organization, to each customer, and can we capture it in writing? That's going to be key. Can we count how many new advocates did we bring to the table? I think that's going to be an interesting one, and then we can also look at things like the satisfaction score. Are we providing the right experience? Is it easy to work with us, or is it super difficult? So it really depends. What are the activities that your CSM team owns beyond the financial transactions, and how much of the financial transactions do they own? And based on that, I would align the KPIs to make sure that they drive the right behavior. Something like QBR. So I'm just reading through the question that this guy is having, and he also asked about QBRs. I'm not really sure how does this fit in, but I'm assuming that your team does QBRs. So in that regard, if you're responsible for QBRs, I would want to ask what is included in the QBR. If the QBR is a prelude to success plans, then or just a review of the account and making sure that you added value, maybe I would add a motion of automatically sending a quick, almost like a CSAT survey after each QBR to everybody that attended to see if they gotten value out of that activity, because we only do it 2, 3, 4 times a year. So we kind of want to make sure that the person executing those QBRs actually nails them every single time, and that the customer perceives that it added value to them. In that regard, if we were to truly be customer-centric, I would even ask the customers, right? Do a little bit of research with the customers to say, how do they think that, like, what do they look at to gauge whether or not we're a successful vendor with them? If they were to give us a scorecard, what would that include?
Great
and then
question.
include that in those metrics.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question. Thanks for popping that in there. Our next question, how can we get other teams in our business to understand that customer success isn't an overflow option to support their roles, sales, service desk, marketing, etc., when they are too busy? Despite strong CSM messaging to customers, it creates confusion.
Well, I read this question and I was thinking, wow, despite strong CSM messaging to customers, I think that there's something to be said about CSMs being perceived as the quarterback. And I hear it again and again where, if there is an AM role, then the CSM becomes this person that every time I see something in the account as the AM or the AE, I'm going to ping that CSM and give them things to do so that they can help the customer become better or increase adoption and consumption, etc. It means to me that the messaging is not quite right internally. You might have the right messaging for the customer, but the organization doesn't understand what your role is exactly. They still think you're the quarterback if they keep throwing stuff at you. So one way to do this is to really take a look at the role definition. So again, we had a project recently where the client simply just wanted us to redo this process, but as we were reviewing what is happening, we noticed that there's not a very clear definition between the AM and the CSM. There was a lot of overlap, and then no wonder that the AM thought that the CSM is in a supportive role to what they needed to do, and so did everybody else. And so one of the things that we recommended is, first and foremost, creating a very clear CSM role that in no circumstance is an overlap with any other role. I think that's the first thing you need to look at. And sometimes the answer is like, yeah, it's not very clear. So first of all, create a very, very clear role definition. If there's any murkiness, clear that out, okay? I think sometimes there's no clear customer life cycle. I've seen it again and again where we think that we know what the CSM role is, but there's no clear customer lifecycle map, no clear activities that each CSM should be doing with the customer on a regular basis. And so then if there's no clear things that we're supposed to do each year, and that's what our role, part of our role definition, then it could be anything. So no wonder you're being given tasks. So take a look at that and say, do I really have a clear customer lifecycle map? And can I share it back with the team members so that they know I'm already busy? Don't throw this stuff at me. If there are additional activities that are being thrown at you, have a conversation with those teams. Say and really clarify that RACI chart. Who should really be doing that if it's not you? Sit down with those folks and explain to them why you don't have time to do it, or you shouldn't be doing it, and who should be doing it, because clearly it needs to be done. If your organization is too small or you don't have a strategy in place on who should be doing it, someone needs to do it. So you either, create a new role, submit, or create a better process. And then really be consistent about the value that you're getting. I think sometimes one of the things that kind of popped up for me with this question is, well, I don't think, they're giving you stuff they don't understand really the value or what it is that you're supposed to be doing. One of the things, I did a presentation with SAP at TSIA's conference. It's called TSW. I encourage you all to, if you're in a leadership role, to consider going to this one. Has a lot of really big companies attending. So it's a very kind of like enterprise-like conference. If you're a really small startup, it might not be for you. And it's mainly geared for team managers and executives. So also the content is very specific. But one of the things that we shared in the presentation is the way that the customer success teams prove value internally and to the client. So this is an example of how did they measure outcomes rather than customer satisfaction. So after each major activity with a customer, QBRs for example, they sent out a CSAT survey to ask them, what kind of value did you get out of this activity? Did you update your, did you optimize your system software configuration? Did we review and optimize give you ideas to optimize your business process? Did we further empower end users, meaning increased adoption? Did we turn on new features, meaning promoted the breadth and depth of product adoption? And did we enable your project team, meaning did we make your life easier with us? Do you feel like you're more empowered to be a champion for us within your organization? So these are their examples. You can have your own values. I actually went through an exercise with my client, and they came up with different things because they're a different organization. This is what works for SAP. But it's just a great example of, look, if you track this over time, you can say, hey, you know, clients where we have done these activities, this is the type of, we show that we have more new feature adoptions than those that don't. And here's the proof. Get proof, show, collect the data, show value, prove value, not just to your customers. I mean, this is great to even show to a customer, but prove it internally. If you're getting into this muck situation where everybody just throws stuff at you, they probably don't get what you're really supposed to be doing.
I love that. I mean, data is huge for every role. You know, proving what you're doing is important for everything. Yeah. But this is a good follow-up question in the chat. In SaaS, at times, product adoption and customer engagement does not necessarily control retention. And sometimes this impacts motivation. How can we address that?
It almost never controls retention. See, the truth is that you can have a customer with really high usage trends, and I'm hoping I'm translating this question properly, but you could have a customer with very high usage trends, and meanwhile, secretly, they're looking for another solution, and in one day, they'll churn and just move to another solution. You'll never be caught off guard. That's why I'm not seriously in love with scorecards that are completely automated and only look at usage trends. It's just never really gives you the whole picture. What we have seen, and it's been proven, in fact, at a conference called CS100 in 2018, we had a guy called Ben Wynn who won the Innovator Awards for Customer Success at the conference by presenting a model where they were able to get very close to 100% accuracy level of renewal forecasts. And they did that by, check that out, looking at the depth of the relationship, meaning did they have relationship with the right resources and providing meaningful, valuable engagements with them. So that has nothing to do with adoption. And then the second aspect of it was, did they get value? And that is not just the actualized value. See, adoption only shows you the actual value that the customer has already gotten. But if they have a 3-year contract with you, they're not really expecting to get full value in year 1. They're expecting to get close to 100 or more than 100 after year 3 or at year 3. So you have some leeway, and it's just hard to say whether a customer is healthy based on adoption only at that point. I'll tell you another story. I used to work for a software company, and one of our customers, literally, we had like 5 modules that this customer could have used, and they only used one of those modules, which was ridiculous, right? And they paid a lot of money for it. And so it was very interesting that they've never churned. In fact, they gave us quotes, they did videos for us, testimonial videos, and I think they kind of, what happened is that they kind of knew that the perceived value of what the application could really do for them was a lot higher than what they've actually done so far. In other words, the executive sponsor had a long-term vision, that the value of the long-term vision of everything that they wanted to do eventually with us was worth the investment, even though right now they were paying a lot higher. And you'll see it also when companies are about to churn, and all of a sudden the CEO flies in and have a discussion with this other CEO, and they renew, even though actual value is fairly low. Point in case, if you can increase and maximize perceived value and have meaningful conversations with your customers, that's how you can fairly accurately forecast renewal. And so hopefully this addresses why sometimes just looking at adoption and customer engagement does not necessarily control the retention.
Absolutely. And these are great questions and such good information. And we're coming close to time. So I'm going to skip over this next one and kind of dive into this one. We did talk about this a little bit, but what data should absolutely be shared at a leadership level, company and company-wide, to drive customer centricity?
If you don't have that already, I would say start with customer surveys and in-depth customer interviews and share that across the board more than anything else. I think that those insights really help. The other thing that I would care to share is, if I were in your place, is what was helpful for customers. Where did customers feel like they're getting value? And I would pinpoint on those first, because you want to make sure that when you share customer feedback, you don't get into a blaming war. You want to inspire people as you do it. And so always talk about challenges as opportunities and demonstrate value already being delivered and recognized by customers to showcase areas where we can double click on and do more of. But that's where I would start. And again, if you were to break the silos while you're doing it so that the customer centricity is embraced by the entire organization, when you talk about your customer success organization, talk about it in a way that's relevant to each one of the other departments, whether it's information that's relevant for them or things that you've helped them with from their own vernaculars of KPIs. So show them how you supported their goals. Demonstrate things that are important for them. For example, if you know that the product team launched a new feature, talk about what your CSM team did to promote these new features and what kind of successes have you seen. I think the product team would really appreciate it. Then talk about things that the customers want in addition to that. But start with your value first, then ask for things. Do enrollment conversations consistently. Yeah.
Another good question. How can you prove the link between revenue in CS and all of the other programs that you're running?
I think it's really hard. It's almost like saying, can you prove that a specific PPC campaign, if you're in marketing, resulted in a deal? Look, at the end of the day, we're going to have multi-touch points. And if we've done the experience right, then we can say that caused overall the renewal. The renewal happens because the customer feels like they have a genuine partner to work with, and they are enrolled in the vision that your company has in terms of the solutions and best practices. I don't think that there's a specific activity that can call out that that's what caused the renewal. I think we should be very cognizant of that, but we can say what activities were believed to have value for the customer. And if we create a success plan for the year, we can say, what are the long-term goals for the customer? What do they want to achieve in the next year? What do they want to achieve in the next 3 months? Have specific qualitative goals and then demonstrate that we have achieved them. I think those are the things that are possible. I think beyond that is kind of like, ooh, I wish I could do that, but.
Yeah, I wish I could talk about this. I feel like I could talk about this like cross team collaboration forever, because as a marketer, it's not my role necessarily to, dive into everything that is customer success, but there are so many pieces that now I'm thinking of as we're kind of talking that really do intricately tie into, their renewal or, new programs that we're launching for them or, fitting their needs when they're unhappy with something with a product. So this is just causing a lot of synapses in my brain. So
yeah, I know we see that a lot. You're not alone.
So to pivot a little bit, and I know, again, we don't have much time. You guys have asked such great questions today. For people on the call who are, hearing this and getting really excited, because again, this is such an exciting field to get into and booming right now. Where is a good place to start if you were entry level and looking to get into customer success and really making like a long-term career out of it?
Yeah, I think it really depends if you're just like right off the bat, like coming off of college. Probably a startup would be a good place to start. They sometimes, a simple product where you don't really need to have very strong industry experience. If it's like a light product, to be honest, I think that coming right off of college, I would say get some experience in a specific industry. Here's the deal. A good CSM is actually a trusted advisor to the client. Let's say the company sells to the CFO. If you're right off of college, do you have the right experience to be an advisor to the CFO? Probably not. So get some actual experience. Then I think is a good place to say, okay, with this experience, where can I be a legitimately good, trusted advisor in a CSM capacity with a software company? I think a lot of people think that CSM is just like a quarterback for the client. Ooh, I'm really good with people, so I could just like, help a client, and because I love helping people. I've heard that a lot. My ears always stand out when I hear it. You want to help people? Go to a nonprofit. As a CSM, we're there to be a trusted advisor to the business lead and the champions of our clients. We're supposed to bring in best of breed practices. We're supposed to coach them on how to be an industry leader within their own rights, how to optimize their organization, and how to leverage our software while doing so. So I think you need some actual professional experience before you go and become a CSM.
Totally agree. And I want to jump ahead to this next question, which ties nicely into that. But what does a typical CSM career path look like? And then how do you decide as you move along, which career path is best for you?
CSM is not something that's like the same in every company yet. And so if you have like strong sales experience, you can either do one or two things. For example, you can either work for a company that sells to salespeople and then have a very mature CSM role, or you can go join a CSM team as a renewal manager, or at a company where the CSM has 150 accounts and they're responsible for renewal and do very well there as well. And so it really depends on what kind of CSM role do you really want to be. I'm assuming that everybody who wants to be a CSM kind of wants the glorified role where you are actually the trusted advisor. You don't necessarily do the financial transactions, which are very salesy, but you're more of a consultative role. So if that's the path you want to take, like I said, get some professional experience so that you could understand where the customer is coming from, and then start as a CSM, maybe start working with a smaller company, smaller accounts, and gradually work yourself into larger accounts. Then you can become a team manager, maybe go do your MBA so you can be actually an executive and really understand how to optimize teams, how to create a vision and talk to the board of directors so that you could take on a more of an executive role. There was another question there. What should I do if I come from HR, for example? Go work for a company that sells to HR teams. So for example, go to SuccessFactors or JobVite or, LinkedIn, or whomever is working with HR teams that needs to recruit or do compensation plans. And so they would be looking for those specific skill sets because they need you to be a trusted advisor. I think that's a really great place to start, is to look for companies that have or want your experience as a CSM.
Yeah, transferable skills are key. And we talk about that so much. And I know so many people are worried about, well, this industry on paper doesn't necessarily like relate at all to this new industry, but it's not necessarily the industry, it's the skills that you gained while working there, and how can you kind of showcase those in this new role? Because, soft skills and a lot of the, meat and potatoes of your role is very transferable.
Very transferable. And they're looking for it too.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they're really looking, if they don't look for any, okay, here's a deal. If you're being interviewed and what they're looking for is your experience with the product, more than your experience as the main persona that they sell to, that's an important flag for you to know that you're probably more of a technical CSM. If they're looking for industry experience and someone that can really talk to the executive level at the company that they're selling to, that means that you're going to be a consultative CSM with a trusted advisor relationship to the customer. And if they're looking for sales experience, you might be doing a lot of renewals. So listen to the questions that they're asking, read through the job description to kind of say, what kind of flavor of CSM are they looking for?
And all of those pieces that you just mentioned, I think are great bits to put in your resume or cover letter. Like perfect little sound bites. So definitely go back and write those down.
Cool.
Okay, so we have like 2 minutes left. Yikes. So I'm going to skip to this question. I know we just chatted away. It was so good. How can you track your own success as a CSM and put yourself in a good spot for leadership or promotion?
That's a good question. I think it's all about proving your value. Can you track what your customers are saying about you? Can you track whether or not can you manage your own book of business? And can you be data driven around that so that you can get quotes and really articulate what have you done for each one of your customers? Did they have a problem? Did they offer a solution? Did you offer a solution? What was the impact? And can you start collecting those anecdotes so that you can share it back when your review is coming up? Can you take some additional classes that could help you potentially gain the skills to manage a team eventually and put your thoughts together in a very consistent framework so that you could articulate it well? I think those are the kind of things that people look for as they think about who to groom. They look for people who can work with customers very well, because as a leader in a CS, you're going to get the toughest customers, and you're going to need to fly in there and talk to the executive level, and you need to be able to have the skills and the experience to do so, and a proven experience that you were actually successful in it in the past.
I love it. I think that was, those were great tips for everyone. And overall, this conversation was so great. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, but I think we covered so much, from basics of customer centricity to the roles available. So thank you, 𝘰𝘱𝑡, so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your experience and just all of these wonderful tidbits and graphics. Everything was amazing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Love you all. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Is there any, last tidbits or like one overall piece of information that you'd love for the audience to just take away from today?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about customer centricity and really go through an example, I really encourage you to go to that, look for that YouTube video with Mary Poppin and myself on youtube.com/CSM practice, or go search for that Pulse podcast by Helping Sales to listen a little bit more about what can happen when you're actually embracing a customer-centric approach. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more color around it. And good luck with everything that everybody on this line is about to do. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This was wonderful. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And, like I said, we do these chats all the time. So make sure to check out powertofly.com/careers and sign up for another one, and look out for an email from me very soon with the recording to this chat. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful weekend. See you again soon.
Thanks. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.